So we're at the end of chapter 20. So we're looking at how urine is stored and then eliminated. So urine forms along the nephrons and it goes out on the collecting ducts. Through the collecting ducts, there's still some chance that for things to modify it, but after it gets through the collecting ducts and it ends up now on the minor calyxes. Again, we're not going to worry too much about the papillae, again, finger-like structures, but once it enters into the minor calyxes, it is now officially urine. There's nothing else is going to happen to it or modify it. And as we've looked, it goes from the minor calyx to the major calyx. From the major calyxes, they will all gather together in the renal pelvis. Now we're going to look at this point, everything on this side is inside the kidneys. Now, the ureters take it out of the kidneys down to the urinary bladder. This is going to be where it is stored, and then when it is time to send it on its way, it goes out through the urethra. And remember, there's only one urethra. There are two ureters. Now, the ureters, you don't have to know how long they are, but they begin at the renal pelvis and go all the way down to the urinary bladder. And they're going to enter into the posterior portion, which isn't a big deal, but you'll see what we're talking about when we look at the inner lining of the urinary bladder. Ureters are going to have 3 layers to them. Most tubes in our body, outside of the alimentary canal and the digestive tract, I should say, and even the urinary bladder, most things are going to have 3 layers. We looked at 3 layers in the blood vessels, but it's going to have an inner mucus coat. I'm not trying to throw this in with blood vessels, but again, just showing this is the basics. Now, most tubes in our body are going to have these 3 layers. An inner mucus coat, which is, again, mucus is because if it's a tube, things are moving through it, and mucus is needed to help it ease through. The middle coat is generally going to be where you're going to find the muscle, so it's going to be a muscular coat. And then you're going to have an outer protective coat that's generally considered a fibrous coat. Right? But those are the 3 layers of the ureter. Now, urine is going to be passed along on the ureters by peristaltic waves. This is why hopefully no one in here has ever had the experience of a kidney stone or whatever, but if a kidney stone gets in there, it's going to spasm up and you'll have these really painful peristaltic waves trying to get rid of it. That's kind of what it talks about here. So if there's ever an obstruction in there, it's going to have these strong peristaltic waves to try and get whatever's in there towards the urinary bladder. Now, the urinary bladder, as it says, it is hollow. Everybody should probably know that. Distensible because it needs to be able to stretch to accommodate more fluid. And it is very muscular. And it's located within the pelvic cavity, down at the bottom. It's one of the lowermost things. Obviously posterior to the pubic symphysis, since that is very anterior. And it's going to be below the parietal peritoneum. Now, this is an area where urine is going to be stored. We've talked about this. We'll say it again in here a little bit, that it's lined with transitional epithelium. It has a triangular, this is the important part on this slide, one of the things I want you to definitely know. It has this little thing in the floor, which we'll see in one of these pictures coming up, called the trigon. It is just a triangular shaped area that is going to be where the 2 ureters come in and the urethra, the one urethra, leaves. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. But the urinary bladder is actually going to have 4 layers, all right? Most things have 3. It's got an inner mucus coat and then a submucosal coat. All right, this submucosal coat is the additional layer. It's going to have a muscular coat, which we're going to look at even more in a second, that is called the destruser muscle, and an outer serous or fibrous coat. And that's going to kind of help, again, serous membranes. That's going to have this little part where it's articulating with the peritoneum. But the most important thing for test-wise on this is this muscular coat, which is called the destruser muscle. The destruser muscle, it allows you to go to the bathroom. Now, there's going to be an internal and external urethral sphincter. Now, again, this one doesn't have the external, but it's lined up and it functions just like the digestive, just like the anal sphincters. The internal one is involuntary. The external one is voluntary to help you control things. Now on this picture, you can see where the urinary bladder is for each of these models. Again, these are pictures that you should know from lab, but those are the two urinary bladders as the location on this picture. Now this is the area I wanted to point out, this area called the trigon. All right, it kind of, boy, that's a bad, I just can't use this thing efficiently at all. But anyway, hopefully you're following along. This little triangular shaped area here is called the trigon. And what's going on with this is all in through here, this is transitional epithelium. Now this opening here and here are the two openings for the ureters. And then there's going to be an opening here that's been cut across so you can see it, which is going to be the opening for the urethra. Now, if I have transitional epithelium around that opening, if it starts swelling up, as it empties, it would wall off that opening and it wouldn't be efficient. So what the trigon is a special type of tissue around it to make sure that nothing gets in front of, or said scientifically, occludes any of these three openings. And so I have this little triangular shaped area that has special tissue, and so we call it the trigon. Again, not going to worry too much about this, but this is kind of showing the four layers. But the mucus coat, I should say, the mucus coat is the transitional epithelium. The mucus coat is what's going to change things. And again, remember that the smooth muscle of the muscular layer is called the destruser muscle. Now the urethra, which is going to be carrying the urine out of the urinary bladder, is going to be different on males and females. On females, it is relatively short. This is why females have a bigger incidence of urinary tract infections, among other things that we won't get into in here. But it is much shorter than the males, and the males again are going to end up having three sections. You've got a prostatic urethra, which is going through the prostate, the membranous urethra, which is once it leaves the prostate, but it hasn't gotten out into the penis. And then once it gets into the penis, it is running through the corpus spongiosum, so it is called the spongy urethra. And so there's going to be mucus glands along the way. They're called urethral glands, but they are mucus glands, again, trying to help things move through. And so that's the urethra. Remember, there's only one urethra in the body. Now, it lists major events of micturition. Now, this is always a fun word to know. Micturition just simply means going pee-pee. And it is fun at parties. If you just are around people and you just say, hey, excuse me while I go micturate, that is always a fun way to start conversations a little bit. So just kidding. Anyway, although I have done that before, and it is fun to watch people's faces when you end up having to explain what you're saying. So this gives a breakdown of how the process is going to be. We're going to have stretch receptors that are going to be stimulated that will let us know when it's time to go. The parasympathetic nervous system, the normal nervous system, is going to cause the destruser muscle to start contracting. That is the signal saying, hey, I need to go. All right, so voluntary contraction of the external urethral sphincter and inhibition of the Micturition reflex by impulses from the brainstem. prevent urination. That's what's trying to tell you to let you get to where you need to go. So you will start making the conscious decision to relax the external urethral sphincter, and it's going to allow you to micturate. So this is how it works. But what I do want you to know, the urinary bladder can hold up to 600 milliliters. But you will begin to feel like you have to go to the bathroom well before you reach that. At 150 milliliters will be when you start feeling that you need to go. I added this on here. This is a list of the different abnormalities in the urinary system. I am not going to test you on these. This is, I don't know, if you'll need this when you get into nursing and the different avenues you might go, but it is a good one to know where it is. We're not going to get into these different diseases in this class.